In Silver Heights, power ruled everything. Until one girl changed the game. And the boy who crossed her, he never saw it coming. Want to know how it all began? Stick around. And before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single twist in this gripping story. It was the first day at Silver Heights Academy, an elite private school known for its luxurious campus, billionaire kids, and a long history of exclusivity. For 16-year-old Ava Carter, stepping through grand iron gates of school felt like stepping into another world. Ava had grown up in a different environment, one built on discipline, respect, and justice. Her father, Detective James Carter, had just been appointed as the new chief of police in the wealthy town of Crestwood, an area known for its deep pockets and deeper secrets. The sprawling campus of Silver Heights looked more like a European estate than a high school. Towering stone buildings with ivy creeping up the sides, manicured lawns that stretched endlessly, and marble fountains placed at precise intervals to give the illusion of effortless wealth. Black town cars and sports vehicles lined the circular driveway, drivers in press suits opening doors for their young passengers. Ava inhaled deeply, adjusting the strap of her plain black backpack. She wasn't intimidated by the expensive cars in the parking lot or the designer outfits her classmates wore. She had seen a different side of the world, the one where people worked hard for their success. But what she didn't realize was that Silver Heights Academy had its own rules, and she was about to break one of the biggest ones. She didn't belong. It wasn't just about the way she dressed, though the contrast was glaring. Her jeans and fitted t-shirt looked ordinary next to the carefully curated, effortlessly expensive outfits of the other students. It wasn't even about where she came from, though she knew her background was far removed from the world of trust funds and summer homes in the Hamptons. It was something deeper, something unspoken but universally understood among the students who had been raised in privilege. Ava had barely taken 3 steps past the entrance before the whisper started. "Who is she?" "New girl. Not from here. Look at those shoes. Are those store-bought?" A scoff. She kept her head high, determined not to let their words get to her. She had dealt with worse. Growing up a detective as a father meant she had seen things, real things, crime scenes, courtroom drama, the harsh realities of people who didn't live behind golden gates. The politics of a high school populated by the children of the world's wealthiest families? That was nothing in comparison. But then she saw them. A group of students stood near the school's main entrance, leaning casually against the ornate railing of the grand staircase leading inside. They weren't just any students. Even from a distance, their presence commanded attention. Their posture, their clothing, the way they barely acknowledged the rest of the students. It was clear they were the untouchables of Silver Heights. At the center of the group was a tall, dark-haired boy with sharp features and an air of absolute control. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie slightly loosened, but somehow the effortless carelessness only made him look more powerful. The student around him laughed at something he said, but when his piercing blue eyes flicked toward Ava, the laughter stopped. Ava met his gaze head-on. She had been raised to never look away, to never back down. But there was something unsettling about the way he studied her, as if he were trying to decipher exactly how she had ended up here. One of the girls beside him, a blonde with a bored expression and designer sunglasses perched on her head, leaned in and whispered something. The boy smirked. Ava felt a strange prickle at the back of her neck. She had the distinct feeling that whatever conversation was happening over there had everything to do with her. She exhaled, pushing forward through the entrance doors. Whatever game they were playing, she wasn't interested. She was here to get an education, nothing more. If Silver Heights had its own set of rules, then she would learn them and navigate around them, or so she thought. As she stepped inside, a hush fell over the students gathered in the grand foyer. Conversations dropped, eyes flickered in her direction, and suddenly it felt like every movement she made was under a microscope. A tall girl with auburn hair, dressed in a perfectly tailored blazer and plaid skirt, stepped forward. She gave Ava a once-over, then tilted her head with a small, unimpressed smile. "New girl," she said, not as a greeting but as a label. "What's your name?" Ava squared her shoulders. "Ava Carter." Murmurs rippled through the crowd at the sound of her last name. She caught snippets of conversation. Carter, as in the new chief of police, didn't know we let in cops' kids. Probably some kind of charity case. The auburn-haired girl smiled wider, though it didn't reach her eyes. Well, Ava Carter, let me give you a piece of advice. Ava didn't respond. She just waited. This isn't the kind of school where you get by on good grades and hard work. The girl's voice was laced with amusement, as if she were letting Ava in on an inside joke. You either belong or you don't. Ava's jaw tightened. Guess I'll have to see for myself, then. The girl's eyes gleamed with something that looked suspiciously like excitement. I guess you will. With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, the crowd parting for her like she was royalty. Ava took a slow breath and looked around the grand foyer once more. The message had been clear. She wasn't just a new student. She was an outsider. And in a place like Silver Heights Academy, that was the worst thing she could possibly be. But Ava Carter had never backed down from a challenge, and she wasn't about to start now. Logan Hastings was the undisputed king of Silver Heights. He wasn't just rich. His family practically owned half the town. His father, William Hastings, was the biggest real estate mogul in the state, and his mother was a former supermodel with connections to Hollywood elites. Logan had never been told no a day in his life, and he had a rule: know your place. At Silver Heights Academy, everyone understood the hierarchy. Logan sat at the top, his name etched into every social rule, every unspoken expectation. If he didn't approve of you, the school didn't either. Teachers looked the other way when he walked down the hall, his custom sneakers clicking against the polished floors. Students either worshipped him or feared him. There was no in-between. Then came Ava Sinclair. She was different, not in the way people at Silver Heights claimed to be different, the kind of different that still came from money, from generational wealth that kept them safe. Ava was actually different. She was black. She was new. She was confident. And worst of all, she didn't bow down to him like the others. The first time Logan noticed her, she wasn't even trying to stand out. She simply existed, and somehow that was enough. She strode down the hallways like she belonged, like she hadn't read the invisible rulebook that dictated who mattered and who didn't. Ava had transferred in from the city, a place Logan only associated with chaotic traffic and people who didn't know when to step aside. She wasn't one of them, at least not exactly. Her father had moved them to Silver Heights for a job, and from what Logan overheard, she was a straight-A student, the type teachers loved, the type who got scholarships to schools like this. But no scholarship could buy social immunity, and Logan had no plans to make an exception for her. The first day, Ava caught stares. Silver Heights Academy had diversity on paper, but it was a kind of diversity that came with qualifications. Your parents had to be rich or famous or both. Ava was neither. That alone made her an anomaly. She wasn't blind to the glances, the murmurs, the way people did a double take, as if trying to figure out why she was here. Ava was used to it. She had spent enough of her life being the only one, the only black girl in an advanced class, the only black girl in a summer program, the only black girl in a room full of people who assumed she had to prove why she belonged there. It was exhausting, but it wasn't new. She adjusted the strap of her bag, walking through the halls with the same self-assuredness she carried everywhere. She knew better than to shrink herself, to act small just to make others comfortable. If she had learned one thing from her father, it was that the world only respected you if you demanded it. But even she couldn't ignore the way Logan Hastings watched her. Their first encounter wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation, no exchange of words. Just his gaze, sharp and assessing, lingering too long. She met his stare head-on. And that was the moment everything changed. Word traveled fast in Silver Heights. By the second day, Ava was already a topic of conversation. Some whispered about her clothes, not designer, but still stylish. Others speculated about why she was here. Maybe she's some politician's daughter. I heard she got in on some kind of academic scholarship. Did you see the way she looked at Logan? No one does that. The last part was true. Logan was used to a certain level of deference. People treated him like royalty because, in their world, he decided who was in, who was out, who mattered. Ava didn't play along. She didn't trip over herself to impress him. She didn't giggle at his jokes like the others. She simply existed in a way that told Logan she didn't care who he was. And that was unacceptable. By the end of the first week, Logan had made up his mind. Ava Sinclair needed to learn the rules. Ava Carter had spent her whole life being told to be the bigger person. Don't stoop to their level, her father always said. People who try to bring you down are already beneath you. She had taken that advice to heart, carrying it with her through every dirty look, every whisper, every insult. But Logan and his crew didn't just want her to ignore them. They wanted her to break. It started with small things, subtle, insidious. A shove in the hallway that seemed accidental. A tray knocked off her hands at lunch. A book she knew she had placed in her locker mysteriously missing. She told herself not to react. But the more she ignored them, the worse it got. You lost, Carter. This school isn't for people like you. Bet your dad cleans our houses. Each remark cut deeper than she let on. She was one of the few black students at Bellwood Academy, a private school in an affluent neighborhood where her father's job as a police officer barely kept them afloat. Unlike her classmates, Ava didn't live in a mansion. She didn't have a summer home or a private driver. And Logan made sure she never forgot it. Brianna was always there, phone in hand, capturing every moment, every humiliation, waiting for Ava to react, to explode. Ava never gave them the satisfaction. But Logan didn't like being ignored. One afternoon, Ava sat alone in the library, flipping through a history book. The hushed murmurs of students studying were a small comfort, a break from the torment. But then she felt it, eyes on her. Looking up, she met Logan's gaze from across the room. He smirked, whispering something to Chad, who chuckled under his breath. Brianna's phone was already raised. Ava forced herself to look back at her book. The chair beside her scraped against the floor as Logan plopped down. What are you reading, Carter? History? Bet you love that topic, huh? All those lessons about slavery must be your favorite part. Ava's grip tightened on the pages, but she didn't look up. She refused to give him the reaction he wanted. Logan leaned in closer. I hear your dad's a cop. That must be embarrassing. Ava finally met his gaze. Not really. It's an honest job. Something you probably wouldn't understand. Travis and Chad laughed. Brianna zoomed in with her phone. Logan's smirk twitched. What did you just say? You heard me. For a moment, there was silence, a crack in Logan's confidence. But it didn't last. His expression hardened, and he reached out, slamming her book shut. The sound echoed to the library, drawing the attention of a few students. But no one intervened. No one ever did. You think you're better than me? Logan hissed. Ava stood, her heart hammering in her chest. I think I don't have time for this. She walked away, feeling their eyes burning into her back. She knew it wasn't over. A few days later, after school, Ava walked alone near the parking lot. She had stayed late finishing an assignment, and most of the students had already left. As she approached her car, she heard footsteps behind her. Hey, Carter. Logan's voice rang out. Ava turned, already sensing trouble. Logan, Travis, Chad, and Brianna were all there, blocking her path. Brianna held up her phone, recording. Logan smirked. I hear your dad's a cop. That must be embarrassing. Ava folded her arms. Not really. It's an honest job. Something you probably wouldn't understand. Travis and Chad snickered. Brianna's phone hovered, capturing every second. Logan's smirk faded. What did you just say? You heard me. Logan's jaw clenched. In a flash, he shoved Ava hard, making her stumble backward. Say that again, he sneered. Ava steadied herself, anger flashing in her eyes. Touch me again and you'll regret it. Logan laughed. Oh yeah? And what's a little girl like you gonna do about it? Ava didn't back down. Not me, but my father? You might want to Google his name before you make another mistake. Logan scoffed. And what's your dad gonna do? A deep, commanding voice answered from behind. Why don't you ask me yourself? Logan's blood ran cold. Standing behind Ava was Chief James Carter, fully dressed in his police uniform. His badge gleamed under the setting sun, and his piercing gaze locked onto Logan like a predator sizing up its prey. For the first time in his life, Logan felt small. Chief Carter took a step forward. Logan Hastings, right? Logan gulped. Yeah, yes, sir. Chief Carter crossed his arms. That's interesting. I just got a call from the school security office. Someone reported an assault happening in this very parking lot. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Logan's eyes darted to Brianna, who quickly hit her phone. No, sir, I was just talking to Ava. Chief Carter's face remained unreadable. Then he turned to his daughter. Ava, what happened here? Ava met her father's eyes and then looked at Logan. For a split second, she thought about staying silent. But why should she? Logan had pushed her, humiliated her. He shoved me, Ava said calmly, in front of everyone. Chief Carter nodded slowly, turning back to Logan. I see. And tell me, Logan, if I check the security footage, am I going to see something different? Logan's face turned pale. And no, sir, he mumbled. Chief Carter let out a low chuckle. That's what I thought. Then he took another step forward, lowering his voice so that only Logan could hear. You're lucky I'm handling this as a father tonight, he said. If I were here as the chief of police, you'd be spending the night in a holding cell. Logan swallowed hard. You will apologize to my daughter, Chief Carter continued. And if I hear even a whisper about you bothering her again, I will personally make sure your father knows exactly what kind of son he's raising. Logan's hands clenched at his sides. His father was strict about one thing, public image. If word got out that his son was being investigated for assault, he would be furious. Logan had no choice. He turned to Ava, his jaw tightening. I'm sorry, he muttered. Say it like you mean it, Chief Carter warned. Logan clenched his teeth. I'm sorry, Ava. Ava tilted her head. For what? Logan's face burned with humiliation. For pushing you, and for everything else. Ava nodded. That's better. Chief Carter patted Logan's shoulder once, hard enough to make him stumble. Good choice. Then he turned to his daughter. Let's go home, Ava. The aftermath of that night rippled through Silver Heights like a storm, leaving whispers and speculation in its wake. By the time the morning bell rang, the entire school was buzzing with hushed conversations and not-so-subtle glances thrown in Ava's direction. She could feel the weight of their stares, but she didn't shrink under them. If anything, she walked a little taller, her chin lifted with a quiet defiance. Logan Hastings was nowhere to be seen. By third period, rumors had already started circulating. Some said he had skipped town, too ashamed to face Ava after what had happened. Others whispered that his father had pulled some strings to get him transferred to a private school away from the scandal. But Ava knew the truth. He was still in Silver Heights, still walking the same halls, still trying to act like nothing had happened. Only now, he avoided her like the plague. Good. She didn't want to see his smug face, didn't want to hear his pathetic attempts to explain himself. He had done enough damage. Let him sit with it. But the real shift in power wasn't just Logan's sudden retreat. It was the way the rest of the school had changed. The way people looked at her now. There was something different in their eyes. Fear? Maybe. Or respect. Either way, no one dared to cross her, because her father was the new chief in town. And that meant everything in Silver Heights was about to change. By the time she got home that evening, the house smelled of freshly brewed coffee and her mother's lavender-scented candles. Chief Donovan Mercer sat at the kitchen table, his uniform still crisp despite a long day at the station. His badge gleamed under the dim kitchen lights, a quiet reminder of the authority he now wielded. Rough day? He asked, setting down his coffee mug as she dropped her backpack onto a chair. Ava shrugged. You could say that. Her father studied her carefully. I know what happened with that boy, Ava. She froze. Of course he knew. He was the chief now. There wasn't a thing in this town that would happen without him hearing about it. Do I need to step in? He asked, voice calm but edged with something dangerous. Ava met his gaze, the same stormy gray eyes she had inherited from him. No, she said firmly. I handled it. A flicker of something, pride perhaps, crossed his face before he nodded. Good. He leaned back in his chair. But I need you to understand something, Ava. Things are going to be different now. There are people in this town who aren't happy about me taking this job. She frowned. Why? Because I don't play by their rules, he said simply. And neither do you. Ava thought about that, about how Silver Heights had always been run by the same families, the same old money and old power that decided who was worth something and who wasn't, about how her father, a man who had built his career on integrity, had just stepped into a role that put him at direct odds with the people who thought they ran this town, and about how that made her a target, too. She straightened. Let them come, she said. I'm not afraid. Her father's mouth quirked up at the corner. That's my girl. That night, as Ava lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she thought about everything that had led to this moment. The way Logan had tried to humiliate her. The way she had turned the tables on him. The way the power in Silver Heights had started to shift, tilting in a direction it had never gone before. She had spent too long being the girl people underestimated. Too long letting others dictate the rules. Not anymore, because her father wasn't just a new chief in town. She was a new queen of Silver Heights. And she was just getting started. What would you do in Ava's situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more gripping content, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for more stories like this.